Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. Now you'll notice that we're not in a studio today. We are at an outside setting at an aircraft hangar. And during this program, you're probably going to hear some background noises of airplanes landing or taking off, or background of trains going by, or a public address system, someone's name being called, because we are in an interview today with one of the most fascinating landmark ladies of El Paso, Texas, Suzie Azar. Suzie, good to have you on my show. Now I'm going to tell you in the viewing audience something else that I don't normally tell people. I'm going to tell you how I voted one time. Once upon a time, I voted for Suzie Azar for mayor of El Paso, and she became the first woman mayor to serve El Paso, and up to this date, October 2009, she still is the only woman to ever serve as mayor of El Paso.
Well, you know, Leon, I've always thought of you as a very intelligent voter.
Oh, well, I thank you very much for that. Okay, for this first part of the program, I want us to deal with how you got into politics.
Well, I worked for a very famous lawyer, Ray Pearson, and he convinced me that I ought to run for precinct chair. And I was elected to precinct chair from 4 different precincts in El Paso. And then in 1985, was elected to city council for Polly Harris's seat. And it was kind of like a little bit at a time, gradually getting up to more and more community service, served on a couple of city boards, and enjoyed public service very much, and really felt like that was a niche that I needed to explore.
And what made you decide that you could be mayor?
Well, I had served 2 terms as a city council representative and had enough positive publicity and name recognition that I felt like I was as capable as anyone, and it was an exciting campaign. And I think that those couple of years, 1989 to 1991, I really made the most impact on this community, and hopefully far-reaching. Even today, I still see projects that we worked on back then coming to fruition. So as a private citizen, you really can work on boards and make things happen, like Amigo Air Show, which I'm very proud of. Mm-hmm. But as a public servant, you can affect people's lives by getting federal grants and making programs happen that wouldn't have happened without your energies.
Well, a number of interviews I've done, I've introduced my guests as landmark ladies of El Paso. And you know many of these, that if I would name them for you today, you would tell me, oh, I know her, I know her. I knew
Sure.
Polly Harris and some of these others. And you really set a standard there for others to achieve. Aren't you looking forward to another woman getting elected as mayor of El Paso?
I am. You know, it's been 20 years since I ran in '89 and was elected. And it is amazing to me because if I go to the community college or any of the women's organizations throughout the city, I see so many talented, caring women that just don't run. I think the reason that we haven't elected one certainly is not because we have a lack of talent,
right,
but just women get that anxiety about running for politics like it's something bad. And occasionally when I have run for office, I've been out there with guys who don't pay their rent, or you know, they steal their cable, or you know, they're just some bums that run for office. So I think there are a lot of talented people who think, well, I'm not one of those crazy people who run for office. And unfortunately, that's a loss to the city, because there are a lot of talented women who could do a great job.
Okay, let's talk about changes in El Paso. Since you were mayor, the city has grown tremendously.
Yes.
Traffic has increased and all of these things. What kind of things would you like to see happening in El Paso?
You know, one of the road projects I think that really should have happened a long, long time ago, and I blame it on the state of Texas, is that we should have connected Doniphan, Paisano, all the way around through the railroad track, or it would have been a bridge that went over the railroad tracks, and skipped Chihuahuita and gotten that traffic around downtown a better way, rather than everybody being funneled there at downtown onto I-10, because it always is a jam up. And if they would have done the outer loop, Loop 375, all the way around, I mean, it's been on the drawing boards for 30 years.
It really has. Not long ago, I interviewed Troy Ainsworth about historic preservation, and we discussed that very situation right
Is that
there,
right?
and around where the Hacienda restaurant used to be,
Right.
and that bridge over there at Yandell. And then recently I interviewed Eric Pearson with Community Foundation, and I raised the issue about vision. I said it seemed to me that years ago some of the leaders in El Paso did not have much vision for what could be done and what El Paso could become. They were kind of self-satisfied. Didn't you see that when you were mayor?
Yeah, when I got into the tenement issue, it was one of the first issues I addressed on city council. Most of the folks that had represented downtown and south side were really not going to mess with the slumlords and the people down there. And they said, you know, those people don't vote, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, you know, when you're elected, you represent everybody, whether they're voters, whether they're, you know, young, old. There's a lot of children whose
Right.
lives are impacted by very bad housing conditions down there. And this is the United States. We owe them a decent standard of living. And if those buildings don't meet code, we need to get on that. And so I was really the first kind of person who addressed that, because other people have said, well, it's always been that way. It had been that way for 70 or 80 years.
So you were a person of vision. You were looking at that and changing that.
I hope so. I mean, I looked at environmental issues like conserving water, like putting an additive in our fuel, oxygenating the fuels in the winter so we didn't get the inversions. And I think El Paso's air quality is better today than it was in '89 for sure.
I consider you a lady of vision, that you were a mayor who had a vision about what could be done. Describe a little bit of that.
Well, one of the issues that actually I got a lot of heartburn from was the stormwater drainage. And I really wanted to set aside monies under the water utility for the Clean Water Act.
Oh, yeah, I remember you got severely criticized for that.
It was terrible. I think that's why I lost my election in 1991.
Yes, yes.
And the press labeled it the rainwater tax. You remember that?
Mm-hmm,
and it was really unfair because El Paso really needed to plan for the future. And then, of course, in 2006, the city lost, what, $35 million worth of homes and countless other projects that are going to cost us many, many millions of dollars more than it would have if we had started on that 20 years ago and gradually spent the money back then.
Has it been the biggest problem? People oppose taxes.
Yes.
How did you deal with that as a public official? How did you convince them, let's do this, we've got to pay for this, we need this?
Well, we did a lot of our civic improvements by putting it out to the voters. I think that's still the best way. The Cohen Stadium, for example, we put that on the ballot. We put the zoo, both expansions, on the ballot. We put streets and water problems, drainage problems on the ballot. And usually the voters would vote for 80 or 90%. But those projects that were what I call the political hot topics, they tended to fail at the ballot.
Right.
And then it was not on our heads that we had done something misrepresenting the people that elected us. They got to choose themselves.
Right. Even the community college, it took 3 bond elections to get the money to build buildings at community college because people kept voting against them.
It's the conservative wave of El Paso. And you have to know that El Paso lives on a much smaller budget than cities comparable size like Austin.
Right.
They have 3 times as much money to spend on their city projects.
Okay. Now, in recent years, have you had, I won't ask you to name any candidates, or what kind of candidates are you looking for that can do well for El Paso in our time?
You know, I like people who have had some experience in life. I guess I prefer candidates over 40.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that young folks that, you know, aspire to office are the worst or can't do the job, but you just have a broader, I don't know, network of people that give you feedback, and people from a limited background don't certainly bring that much to the table. And every single representative, although they may have grown up in the valley or downtown or wherever, they represent the city as a whole. And like you said, they need to look beyond their district and be able to represent the whole city and its future.
Right. And that's El Paso's future we're talking about, the people's
Absolutely.
future. Right.
Absolutely.
Have you had candidates come and ask for your endorsement?
I have. As a matter of fact, I was the treasurer for Belen Robles' campaign for mayor, and she was looking like number one, and then Ray Caballero jumped into the race at the last minute, and he kind of outshined her, and she didn't make it. But I really enjoyed working on her campaign.
And she's now on the Community College Board of Trustees.
Lucky for you.
Yeah, I interviewed her when she was running for the seat. And I said, no, I can't come out and endorse or oppose you on any of these things, but let's talk about it, why you got it. You're public servants. Why are you a public servant? Why do you give so much time to the public?
In your private life, and I've had a number of businesses and have enjoyed being involved in the community on boards and different community affairs activities, you really can't touch people's lives like you can as a public servant. I mean, the fact that I was able to eradicate the tenements in South El Paso, some 1,000 units of substandard housing were renovated and built to standards, and that was probably about $15 million of federal funding that we were able to bring to El Paso. And lives, I mean, children, families were helped in a way that I couldn't have done personally.
And you had fights with the slumlords. I remember those fights that you had with the slumlords. We won't name any of them today. Some of them are gone now.
Yeah, really.
Well, I certainly have enjoyed this, and it's been a great pleasure seeing you and seeing in this location. Now we're going to break, just to take a short break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about another part of your life, which is flying.
Great.
Stay tuned, because we'll be right back.
One night in December of 1968, I was working a little bit late. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and my door opened, and in walked Joe Christie, our state senator. Joe Christie's office down the hall from me a little bit, and he told me that they were going to have a meeting to discuss the creation of a community college here at 7 o'clock that night, and would I be willing to come? And so I said, yeah, I would. And they had an agenda there with various committees being formed and had names filling the spots. And of course, I was just listening. The only thing at the end was he had a spot there for co-chairman and no names. And he suddenly said, Joe Foster is my co-chairman, and I about fell out of my chair. Well, all the committees by the 28th had finished their work. And then we had a political committee going to try to get the vote out across the county, you know, to win the election. They were good enough to give us a district, school district, and elect a board of trustees, but they didn't give us any money. I thought we had done a good job, but people didn't want to pay taxes. The thing we ultimately had to do was get money. You couldn't run a school with no money. Your community college in those days, and maybe today still, have to answer to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And Tom Hatfield, Dr. Tom Hatfield was our liaison with the board. And he figured out a way to get us some state money without passing it in a bond issue. That was, we had to get some classes open, and then we could get the student equivalent fee from the state of Texas. So we worked on that, got that done. We got a president hired, and got us a little space down at Thomason General Hospital to get things open. And then we started having a few small classes. The Logan Heights campus, I served in the Army in that facility out there. I got my basic training there, and when I saw that they were closing down basic training, then we went to the commanding general at Fort Bliss and asked if we could lease it for the community college. And we got that worked out. It's solved a big problem for us. Texas bond issues would only permit the sale of bonds based on the property owner vote. We felt that was an error. The landlord always passes his taxes on to the tenant. We piggy-banked a lawsuit that another community college had filed with the U.S. Supreme Court, and went to Washington and prevailed. and so we were able to sell our bonds. We had already taken over the El Paso Independent School District facility in downtown. That was their old administration headquarters, and that's where the Allied Health is today, I believe. And so that was the first owned property that we had. The Logan Heights facility was a wonderful starter, but then we started, after we got the bond money, we started the architects working and designing the Valle Verde campus. And it took about 2 years to get that done. I have said all along that community college is the significant thing that happened to the city of El Paso in the 20th century. I'm just thoroughly excited and pleased to see what's happening out here. Obviously, you have a tremendous administration. It's a good board. They're all working to improve the college every day. I love it.
Welcome back to our very special program with Suzie Azar. We are at a location that she operates as a flight business. She teaches people how to fly. Now, Suzie, for many years you and your husband, Dick Azar, that I also knew for a long, long time, and he died this year in May, as I understand. And we want to give tribute to you for all that you and Dick did during all of those years. Helped start the Amigo Air Show. I was Uncle Sam for many years with you at the Amigo Air Show, and a lot of the other things have been happening. Now tell us how you got interested in and how you started flying, and then let's move up to where we are today.
Well, in high school, I was a member of Civil Air Patrol, and I know you've talked to Debbie Torres recently of Civil Air Patrol here in El Paso. And I actually joined to meet boys, you know.
Oh, that's a good reason.
15-year-olds are kind of thinking that's a good way to meet boys. And I actually got kind of excited, went flying at that young age and thought, I could do this. This is fun. Mm-hmm. And when I came to El Paso, I worked for Dick Azar at Coors, and he sponsored the All-Women's Air Race Classic, formerly known as the Powder Puff Derby.
Oh, yes.
And I met women of all sizes and shapes. They were old, young, short, fat, tall, skinny, you know,
They could fly airplanes.
They could all fly, and they were having such a good time. And I visited with one of the women pilots, and she said, well, you know, Suzie, you'll learn to fly when you decide you deserve to fly. And I think women in general have the idea that their first responsibility is their children and education, taking care of their home, looking nice.
And flying is not cheap. It takes money
Flying
to do
is
that.
expensive. It seemed like an extravagance.
Right.
But when I was challenged with the idea of did I deserve to fly, and I thought, well, if all those men deserve to fly, certainly I deserve to fly.
Amen.
So I was challenged to go out, and I took $500 and went to the Piper dealer and soloed with that money for about $500 back in the day, 30 years ago.
Now, where were you living then?
Here in El Paso.
That was here in El Paso.
At Southwest Air Rangers out there at the airport. And it was so wonderful. And also as a teenager, I raced sailboats back in Michigan, where I was born.
Oh, you had a competitive spirit.
And so I was kind of into that air thing, you know, and aviation was just right up my alley. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of really taken by it, almost addicted to it. And I guess I used to convince myself, you know, I could be doing, I guess, hard drugs for $75. It's certainly more money than lunch money, but I just spent it on airplane flying.
You got a high from airplanes.
Yeah, so I had to kind of say, well, at least it's healthy.
Now, how old were you when you got your license?
32.
32 when you got your license to fly. But you'd always been fascinated with it, even from
I had, since
years.
I was a teenager. And nobody in my family flew, so I really didn't have any role models. But to tell you what the power of a role model is, both my daughters were solo in an airplane in their teenage years, and both are flying actively today and have had their licenses for over 20 years.
Now, haven't I heard that you have had coast-to-coast competition that you've flown in some of these competitive
I
races?
have. In fact, in 2008, I completed my 50th state to have flown in. Now, I did fly in Hawaii, but I didn't fly over to Hawaii.
Okay.
And I have flown up to Alaska, but I needed Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and I went on one of these cross-country races,
Right.
especially because they went to those states.
Oh, wow. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this business. Tell us the name of your business, and we want to give you a chance to put your telephone number or website, whatever you want, that we can show on the screen.
Okay, well, my business is Blue Feather Aero, A-E-R-O, and that's our website, www.bluefeatheraero.com. And you can find out all about us on the website. And we're located here at the Santa Teresa Airport in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, just outside of El Paso. But I might just say, for those people who think I'm disloyal to El Paso, most of my employees and most of my customers are from El Paso because we're really just a suburb here of El Paso. And we really have enjoyed being here. Perhaps I'll give you a tour of our facilities, but we've probably soloed somewhere around 200 students, and we've gotten at least 100 or more of them certificated as private pilots or instrument pilots, commercial pilots, multi-engine pilots, and even flight instructors.
And when did you and Dick open this business?
In 2001.
And how many employees do you have now?
I have 8.
8 employees.
And then I have another dozen flight instructors who are self-employed. They come and the student rents the airplane from me, but they pay their instructors separately.
And how many planes do you have?
I own 9 airplanes.
Now, I don't know any other woman that owns 9 airplanes in El Paso.
Yeah, you know, I was telling my daughters, I said, you know, I'm really pretty unusual. I have like 8 trucks, 9 airplanes, 2 boats, about a couple of those vans, a couple of cars. It's like I'm kind of like over motorized.
Right. And you've given some of these to the War Eagles Air Museum.
I
see
have
your
donated.
name on some of those over there.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that way you don't get overburdened with too many cars and trucks and toys and
yeah,
things
my
like
insurance bills are a killer.
Well, Landmark Lady of El Paso, Suzie Azar, you are a fascinating person, and we need a lot more time for this kind of program with people like you. Thanks for being a friend for so many years and letting us come out. We're going to get a tour right after this program.
Sounds good.
Thank you for watching another program we call Perspectives El Paso. Tune in for another fascinating guest in the future. I'm Leon Blevins.